Nobody believed it when she stepped onto that stage, a simple hotel maid, amidst a sea of millionaires. They had mocked her, dismissed her, never imagining the wealth of wisdom and resilience hidden beneath her uniform. This isn't just a story about money, it's about a fortune far greater than any bank account could hold. It's about a moment that silenced the most arrogant voices and proved that true richness isn't measured in dollars, but in dignity. Our story begins at the annual gala of the Sterling family, a name synonymous with immense wealth and influence. The grand ballroom of the prestigious Astoria Hotel shimmered with gold and crystal, a testament to their boundless fortune. Every guest was a titan of industry, a socialite draped in diamonds, or a politician whose every word carried significant financial weight. Amidst this glittering display of opulence, stood Eliza, a woman whose daily life revolved around ensuring the comfort of these very people. Eliza, a black woman in her late 40s, carried herself with a quiet grace, her movements efficient and her eyes observant. She had seen it all, the casual dismissals, the entitled demands, the thinly veiled contempt for those who served them. Yet, she performed her duties with unwavering professionalism, a silent testament to her inner strength. Before we dive deeper into this journey, if you enjoy stories that touch the heart and inspire the soul, hit the like button, subscribe, and comment below where you're watching from. We love hearing your stories too. The Sterling family, particularly the matriarch, Mrs. Eleanor Sterling, and her son Richard, were notorious for their condescending attitudes. Their wealth seemed to amplify their disdain for anyone they deemed beneath them. Tonight, they were celebrating a new business venture, a deal that promised to add even more millions to their already overflowing coffers. The air was thick with self-congratulation, and the champagne flowed as freely as their boasts of financial prowess. Eliza, clearing discarded napkins and half-empty glasses, overheard snippets of their conversation. "Can you believe the audacity?" Mrs. Sterling scoffed, her voice dripping with disdain. "Some people just don't understand the value of $1, let alone $1 million. They think everything should be handed to them." Richard chuckled, adjusting his designer watch, a timepiece worth more than Eliza's annual salary. "Indeed, mother. It's a different world when you're not constantly chasing the next paycheck. True wealth is about freedom, not just having enough to get by." Eliza felt a familiar pang, but she pushed it down. Her focus was on her work, on providing for her family, on the quiet pride she took in her honest labor. She had always believed that true value wasn't in the accumulation of money, but in the integrity of one's character. As the evening wore on, the mockery grew bolder. A young, arrogant heir, flushed with drink, deliberately dropped a handful of expensive canapes on the pristine white carpet, then looked directly at Eliza with a smirk. "Oops," he slurred. "Looks like someone needs to earn their keep, eh? Don't worry, my family's fortune can cover a few stains." The other guests snickered, their laughter echoing through the grand hall, a symphony of privilege and indifference. Eliza simply knelt, her movements unhurried, and began to clean, her face a mask of composure. But beneath that calm exterior, something was stirring. A quiet resolve was hardening, a determination that would soon shatter their comfortable illusions. What could possibly make a woman, so accustomed to being invisible, suddenly demand the attention of an entire room filled with the most powerful people? The answer was about to shock them all, and it had nothing to do with money, but everything to do with a hidden truth that would redefine their understanding of true richness. The air in the ballroom crackled with the casual cruelty of the elite. Eliza, still on her knees, felt the weight of their gaze, a mixture of amusement and indifference. She had cleaned countless spills, endured countless slights, but tonight felt different. The words of Mrs. Sterling and Richard, their dismissive talk of money and worth, had struck a nerve. It wasn't just about the spilled canapes, it was about the fundamental disrespect, the belief that their immense fortune somehow elevated them above basic human decency. Eliza rose slowly, her movements deliberate, her eyes scanning the room. She noticed the stage, where a microphone stood, ready for the evening's entertainment. A thought, audacious and terrifying, began to form in her mind. Meanwhile, Richard Sterling, emboldened by the laughter of his peers, continued his tirade. "You see, mother," he declared, his voice carrying across the room, "this is why we work so hard. To ensure we never have to be in such a position. To build a legacy of wealth that protects us from this." He gestured vaguely towards Eliza, who was now standing near a service entrance, seemingly unnoticed. His words were met with nods of agreement and murmurs of approval from the assembled guests, each one a testament to their shared belief in the absolute power of money. They were so engrossed in their own self-importance, so blinded by their collective riches, that they failed to notice the subtle shift in Eliza's demeanor. The quiet maid, usually a shadow in the background, was no longer just observing. She was contemplating. Eliza's mind raced, a whirlwind of memories and emotions. She thought of her grandmother, a woman who had worked tirelessly, cleaning houses for meager pay, always emphasizing the importance of self-respect and the richness of a kind heart. She remembered her own struggles, the sacrifices she had made to send her daughter to college, the endless hours she had spent on her feet, all to build a better future, not just for her family, but for her community. This wasn't about personal offense anymore. It was about every invisible worker, every person whose dignity was trampled underfoot by the golden boots of privilege. The injustice of it all, the sheer arrogance of their inherited wealth, fueled a fire within her. Could she truly challenge this ingrained system of disrespect? What would it cost her? Her job? Her reputation? The financial stability she so desperately needed. The band began to play a soft jazz tune, a temporary lull in the evening's festivities. This was her chance. Or was it madness? Her heart pounded, a drumbeat against the silence of her resolve. She took a deep breath, the scent of expensive perfume and stale champagne filling her lungs. Her gaze fell upon a small ornate box on a nearby table, a donation box for a local charity that the Sterling family had reluctantly agreed to sponsor. It was almost empty, a stark contrast to the overflowing pockets of the guests. The irony was not lost on her. The vast fortune of these individuals could change so many lives, yet they chose to hoard it, to flaunt it, to use it as a weapon of social division. As the band finished their set, and a brief silence descended upon the room, Eliza made her decision. A decision that would not only shock the Sterling family, but would echo far beyond the walls of the Astoria ballroom. What secret could Eliza possibly possess? What truth could she unveil that would make these powerful people, so secure in their wealth, suddenly question everything they believed about money and morality? The answer was about to change the entire narrative of the evening. With a newfound resolve, Eliza walked towards the stage, her footsteps surprisingly steady on the plush carpet. The few guests who noticed her merely assumed she was another hotel staff member, perhaps preparing for a late-night cleanup. They paid her no mind, their conversations about stock portfolios and luxury real estate continuing uninterrupted. Mrs. Sterling was now regaling a small group with a story about a recent acquisition, a multi-million-dollar deal that had further cemented their family's financial dominance. Richard, meanwhile, was checking his phone, probably monitoring the latest market fluctuations, his attention firmly fixed on his digital empire of money. As Eliza approached the microphone, a low hum of feedback briefly cut through the chatter. A few heads turned, annoyed by the interruption. The event organizer, a harried young man in a tuxedo, rushed forward, a look of panic on his face. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but..." he began, his voice hushed and apologetic. Eliza simply offered him a small, knowing smile and gently pushed his hand away from the microphone. Her eyes, usually downcast, now held a steady, unwavering gaze that seemed to pierce through the superficiality of the room. A ripple of confusion spread through the nearest tables. Who was this woman? And why was she on stage? Mrs. Sterling, mid-sentence about her latest financial triumph, paused, her brow furrowed. "What in the world?" she muttered, her voice sharp. Richard looked up from his phone, his expression a mixture of irritation and mild curiosity. He recognized Eliza, of course, but couldn't fathom why she would be standing there. The murmurs grew louder, a blend of bewilderment and indignation. This was their event, their exclusive gathering of the wealthy, and this was simply unacceptable. Eliza took a deep breath, her heart still pounding, but her voice when it came was clear and resonant, carrying effortlessly through the state-of-the-art sound system. "Good evening, esteemed guests," she began, her tone calm, almost serene. The unexpected formality, coupled with her unexpected presence, caused a hush to fall over the room. The conversations died down, one by one, as everyone turned their attention to the stage. The silence was deafening, broken only by the soft clinking of ice in glasses. "My name is Eliza," she continued, her gaze sweeping across the faces in the room, lingering for a moment on Mrs. Sterling and Richard. "And for the past 15 years, I have had the privilege of working here at the Astoria Hotel. I've seen many galas, many celebrations of success, and many fortunes being discussed." A nervous cough broke the silence from somewhere in the back. Eliza paused, allowing her words to sink in. She wasn't angry, she was simply stating facts, her voice devoid of any accusation, yet carrying an undeniable weight. "Tonight, I heard a lot of talk about money, about wealth, about what it means to be truly rich." Her eyes met Richard's, and for the first time he looked away, a flicker of unease crossing his face. "And it made me think about a different kind of fortune, one that isn't measured in bank accounts or stock market gains." The tension in the room was palpable. What was she doing? Was she going to beg for money? Was this some kind of bizarre protest? The guests exchanged bewildered glances, their expressions ranging from annoyance to outright disbelief. They were accustomed to controlling every narrative, especially when it involved their money. But Eliza was about to tell a story they never expected, a story that would challenge their very definition of richness, and leave them wondering if their vast fortunes were truly as valuable as they believed. Eliza's voice, calm and steady, filled the opulent ballroom. "You see," she continued, her gaze now fixed on no one in particular, but encompassing everyone, "I've learned that true wealth isn't about what you accumulate, but what you give. It's not about the size of your bank account, but the richness of your spirit." A few guests shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the kind of speech they were used to hearing at such exclusive gatherings. They were accustomed to discussions of market trends, investment opportunities, and the latest luxury acquisitions, not philosophical musings on generosity. Mrs. Sterling's face was a mask of thinly veiled annoyance. Richard, however, seemed to be listening intently, a flicker of something akin to curiosity in his eyes. "I remember a few years ago," Eliza began, her voice softening, "there was a young man, a bellhop here at the Astoria. His name was Marcus. He was saving every penny, every dollar, to bring his younger sister, who was very ill, from their home country for life-saving medical treatment. He worked tirelessly, often taking extra shifts, sacrificing his own well-being for his family. He wasn't rich in money, not by your standards, but he possessed a fortune of love and dedication that I have rarely seen." Eliza paused, allowing the image of Marcus, his hopeful eyes and tired smile, to settle in the minds of the listeners. The silence in the room was now absolute, a stark contrast to the earlier cacophony of self-congratulation. Even the clinking of ice had stopped. "One day," Eliza continued, her voice gaining a quiet intensity, "Marcus received devastating news. His sister's condition had worsened, and the cost of her treatment had doubled. He was heartbroken, desperate. He had almost reached his goal, but this new financial hurdle seemed insurmountable. He felt like all his hard work, all his savings, all his hope, had been for nothing. He was ready to give up, to surrender to the crushing weight of his circumstances." Eliza's eyes scanned the faces in the crowd. Some looked genuinely moved, others still skeptical, but all were listening. The narrative, so different from their usual concerns, was drawing them in, forcing them to confront a reality far removed from their gilded cages of wealth. "But then," Eliza said, her voice rising slightly, a hint of triumph in her tone, "something extraordinary happened. A group of his colleagues, other hotel staff, housekeepers, waiters, even some of the kitchen staff, heard about his plight. They weren't rich, not by any stretch of the imagination. They lived paycheck to paycheck, just like Marcus. But they understood the true meaning of community, of compassion. They pooled their meager resources, every spare dollar, every spare cent, and together, they raised the remaining money Marcus needed. It wasn't a grand gesture from a millionaire, it was a collective act of profound kindness from those who had very little to give, but gave it all anyway." A few sniffles could be heard from the audience. The story, so simple yet so powerful, was chipping away at their carefully constructed facades of indifference. The contrast between the immense wealth in the room and the selfless generosity of the hotel staff was becoming painfully clear. What would these titans of industry, so focused on their own financial empires, do when confronted with a fortune built not on money, but on the boundless currency of human connection and empathy? The answer, when it came, would challenge their very understanding of what it meant to be truly rich. Eliza's words hung in the air, a stark contrast to the usual self-congratulatory speeches. The room, once filled with the clinking of glasses and the murmur of privileged conversations, was now utterly silent. Mrs. Sterling's face, initially a mask of annoyance, had softened, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. Richard, who had been looking away, now met Eliza's gaze, a genuine look of introspection on his face. The story of Marcus and his colleagues, their collective act of generosity, had pierced through the thick armor of their wealth, reaching something deeper within them. It was a story not of financial triumph, but of human triumph, a victory of spirit over circumstance, a testament to a different kind of fortune. Marcus's sister received her treatment, Eliza continued, her voice filled with quiet pride. She recovered fully, and today, she is a thriving young woman, pursuing her dreams, all thanks to the kindness of strangers who became family. They didn't have millions, they didn't have vast fortunes, but they had something far more valuable, a shared humanity, a willingness to sacrifice for another. Eliza paused, letting the full weight of her words settle. The message was clear. True richness wasn't about the money you possessed, but the compassion you showed. It wasn't about how much you had, but how much you were willing to give, not just of your money, but of your time, your effort, your heart. Then, Eliza's gaze shifted, landing directly on Mrs. Sterling and Richard. Her voice, though still calm, held a new, unwavering firmness. I've heard a lot tonight about the value of a dollar, about the importance of building a legacy of wealth. And I agree, money can be a powerful tool. It can build hospitals, fund research, create opportunities. But it can also build walls, create divisions, and blind us to the true needs of the world around us. The air grew thick with unspoken tension. The guests, who had been captivated by the story of Marcus, now felt the uncomfortable spotlight turn on them. Were they being judged? Were their vast fortunes being questioned? The discomfort was palpable, a stark contrast to the easy confidence they usually exuded. I also heard, Eliza continued, her voice now carrying a subtle edge, about some who believe that true wealth protects them from this. She gestured subtly towards the spot where the young heir had deliberately dropped the canapes, a silent accusation that resonated deeply. The young man in question visibly flinched, his face flushing. But I believe, Eliza stated, her voice rising slightly, that true wealth, true freedom, comes not from avoiding the struggles of others, but from engaging with them, from lifting others up, from recognizing that our fortunes are interconnected. This was no longer just a story, it was a direct challenge, a moral reckoning. The silence in the room was no longer one of polite attention, but of stunned realization. They had been so busy accumulating their millions, so focused on their own financial empires, that they had forgotten the very essence of what it meant to be human. Eliza was not asking for money, she was asking for something far more profound, a change of heart. What would the Sterling family, and indeed, all the wealthy guests, do when confronted with this uncomfortable truth? Would their immense fortunes allow them to escape the weight of Eliza's words, or would they finally understand that some debts cannot be paid with money alone? The answer would determine not just the fate of the evening, but perhaps, the future of their very souls. A profound silence enveloped the ballroom, heavier than any gold or diamond. Eliza's words, delivered with such quiet conviction, had stripped away the layers of pretense and privilege, leaving the wealthy guests exposed to an uncomfortable truth. Mrs. Sterling, usually so composed, looked genuinely shaken. Her eyes, which had always held a calculating glint, now seemed to reflect a flicker of something akin to shame. Richard, for his part, had lowered his head, his earlier arrogance replaced by a visible discomfort. The young heir who had mocked Eliza earlier was now staring at his shoes, his face a deep crimson. The air was thick with unspoken apologies and dawning realizations. Eliza's gaze softened slightly as she looked at the faces before her. I am not here to condemn anyone, she said, her voice gentle but firm. I am simply here to remind us all that the true measure of a person, and indeed of a society, is not in the size of its bank accounts, or the grandeur of its galas, but in how it treats its most vulnerable, how it extends compassion to those who serve, and how it uses its immense fortune to uplift, not to diminish. Her words resonated with an undeniable power, a moral authority that transcended any financial standing. This was not a maid speaking to her employers. This was a human being speaking to other human beings, reminding them of their shared humanity, a concept often forgotten in their pursuit of more money and more power. Then, in a moment that would forever be etched in the memories of those present, Eliza turned her attention to the small, almost empty donation box for the local charity. This box, she said, her voice tinged with a subtle sadness, represents an opportunity. An opportunity to invest in a different kind of wealth. A wealth of hope, of healing, of human potential. It's a chance to turn a portion of your vast riches into something truly invaluable. She didn't ask for donations. She simply presented the choice, a silent challenge to their conscience. The silence that followed was different from before. It was no longer a silence of shock, but one of contemplation, of internal debate. The guests, accustomed to being in control, found themselves in an unfamiliar position, confronted with a moral dilemma that their money could not easily solve. Mrs. Sterling slowly raised her head, her eyes meeting Eliza's. For a long moment, they held each other's gaze, a silent exchange that seemed to span years of unspoken class divides. Then, to the astonishment of everyone, Mrs. Sterling reached into her designer handbag, pulled out her checkbook, and began to write. The scratching of her pen on paper was the only sound in the vast ballroom. She tore off the check, folded it, and without a word, walked towards the stage. She placed the check, face down, into the donation box. It was a gesture that spoke volumes, a silent acknowledgement of Eliza's words, a profound shift in her perception of true value. Richard, watching his mother, felt a profound jolt. He had always seen her as the epitome of financial shrewdness, a woman whose every move was calculated for maximum monetary gain. But this was different. This was raw, uncalculated, and deeply human. What amount of money could possibly be on that check, and what would this unprecedented act of generosity mean for the Sterling family's legacy, and for the future of the Astoria Hotel? The answer was about to unfold, revealing a fortune far beyond their wildest dreams. The sight of Mrs. Sterling, the formidable matriarch, placing a check into the donation box sent a ripple of astonishment through the room. It was an act so out of character, so unexpected, that it forced everyone to reevaluate their assumptions. Richard, still reeling from his mother's gesture, watched as other guests, one by one, began to follow suit. A quiet procession formed, as men and women who had earlier scoffed at Eliza's presence now approached the stage, their faces etched with a newfound humility. They didn't just drop in a few dollars. They contributed significant sums, their own fortunes now being channeled towards a cause greater than themselves. The young heir who had spilled the canapes, now visibly contrite, approached the box and with a shaky hand, placed a substantial amount of money inside, offering Eliza a silent, heartfelt apology with his eyes. Eliza watched, a gentle smile gracing her lips. This wasn't about her, it was about the power of a single voice to ignite a spark of change, to remind people that true richness lies not in what you possess, but in the impact you have on others. The ballroom, once a symbol of exclusive wealth, was transforming into a beacon of shared humanity. The clinking of ice was replaced by the rustle of checks and the soft murmur of renewed purpose. The Sterling family, who had arrived that evening basking in their financial prowess, were now witnessing a different kind of legacy being built, one not measured in millions, but in moments of profound connection and compassion. As the last guest made their contribution, Eliza stepped back to the microphone, her voice filled with a quiet triumph. "Tonight," she said, her gaze sweeping across the transformed faces, "you have shown that the greatest fortune is not found in the pursuit of personal gain, but in the collective embrace of empathy. You have proven that even the most immense wealth can be a force for good, a catalyst for hope, a true blessing when wielded with kindness." Mrs. Sterling, standing near the stage, nodded slowly, a tear tracing a path down her cheek. Richard, his eyes still on Eliza, felt a profound shift within himself, a realization that the true value of his family's money lay in its potential to uplift, to heal, to create a better world. The evening ended not with a grand financial announcement, but with a quiet understanding. The Sterling family, and indeed all the guests, left the Astoria Hotel that night with more than just memories of a lavish gala. They carried with them a renewed sense of purpose, a deeper understanding of what it truly meant to be rich. Eliza, the hotel maid, had not only left them speechless, she had left them transformed. Her courage, her wisdom, and her unwavering belief in the power of human connection had redefined their entire perception of wealth and fortune. This story reminds us that true richness isn't about the size of your bank account, but the size of your heart. It's about the lives you touch, the hope you inspire, and the legacy of kindness you leave behind. So, what kind of fortune are you building? If this story touched your heart, don't forget to give this video a like, subscribe to our channel, share this video and tell us in the comments, what part of this journey moved you the most? There's another story waiting for you, and it might just change the way you see the world. Thank you so much for watching and see you soon.